And we are live. You don't ask when I'm trying to do it. Just now I ruined the opening. I ruined the opening.
Don't worry about it.
And we are live. Hi, and welcome to the Spoken Word with Raz. I'm Raz, your host, and today we have the wonderful and terrible Ashley, the one that's always mean to me.
Absolutely.
And we have the queen herself, Morgan.
Hello.
We missed her last week. She was MIA. She's here today.
In exchange for Happy.
Yes, in exchange for Happy, the doggo himself is now gone, and I miss him dearly because he's my best doggo. But and finally, we have again our guest, Taranak.
Not that computer. He's so naughty and complex.
Oh, how has everyone been?
Why are you
Just
staring at me? I
dandy.
know how I've been.
Well, Dandy, how you been?
Meh.
Meh?
Meh.
Extrapolate?
Meh.
Okay, Taranak.
Just curious whether that's a solid meh or is that a meh meh? Sounded like the second.
She's throwing her hands in the air and just generally
Meh.
like, meh.
Right.
Just a general wave of her hands.
It's starting to not sound like a word. Please, can we carry on?
It's a mess. It's a mess with a slight possibility of.
Yeah. There you go. She gets it.
Hey, what about you, Taranak?
Well, if we're going along with the thing, I guess I'd say meh plus.
Plus.
I've been on a
bit
roller
better than
coaster. A little bit better than that. I have been on a roller coaster. I mean, that is my life.
An actual one or an emotional one, though?
Huh?
Said what, an actual roller coaster or an emotional one?
Yes.
Yes. I haven't been on an actual roller coaster in years. I really need to go on one. But emotionally, mentally, all those fun things. I don't know. I had a rough week. I mean, I legitimately had a rough week. Not in a bad way. It's just, one of those things where you just kind of, how to put it, you learn a lot of things about yourself, and then you try to figure them out. And they're typical because usually, other people pay for your inability to understand yourself.
So you were being you.
Yes.
Okay.
But I don't always have rough weeks.
Yeah.
It's a perpetual affliction that he has to deal with.
Yeah, and that actually is what leading me into our topics today, because I think the two things that we talk a little bit about, and again, I think is the super important, everyone wants it to be important, is communication and conversation. A lot of people suck at it.
Yeah,
Don't look at me.
I do.
And I don't mean general conversation. I don't even mean general conversations. I don't even necessarily mean, like, again, small talk. Like, yeah, there are people that suck at that, but I'm mean, like, communicating, like, thoughts and feelings in a way. Because I think a lot, like, does lead into anxieties and fears and stuff, but it's also just the lack of, I think part of it is the lack of language. Not having the words to say to begin with.
I can concur.
I would say that there's an element of that, and there's an element of, I don't know, the social anxiety in addition to that. With all the pressures that go along with it now, you just convince yourself of things to stop yourself from even getting to the point of communicating, I think. I mean, that's definitely where I'm at. I'm sort of black-pilled to the point where it's like, no, I'll stop myself before I even get to the point where I'm struggling to communicate because I've already decided it's not worth the effort.
Yeah, I'm kind of like that too, where I want to actually communicate with people, talk to people, but I never know exactly what to say. Even if I do have multiple things I could say, I just stare there at the screen like, okay, but what do I say? Like, I could literally say, oh, how are you? What's up? What are you doing right now? But instead I stare at the screen like, what do I say?
If I may, there's a common meme that came out a while back that sometimes having conversations with, especially certain types of people, but in general, it still can follow, is some conversations are like playing chess with the pigeon. You know, the pigeon doesn't care, poops all over the board, knocks everything over, and struts around like it did something absolutely great. And nothing is accomplished. And there's a lot of people that I approach in that manner of, once they start, knocking things over and dropping little bombs all over the game board, it's like, okay, this is not a worthy conversation of wasting time with. However, that is only one tiny aspect, like a quarter. There's still a large 50% where you're actually trying to communicate ideas. And I think that's really what we're driving at is, how do you effectively communicate or adapt, right?
Right. That's a very much a thing. Yeah. Um. Yeah. How do you adapt? How do you learn to communicate? How do you figure out the people that are worth talking to? Um. And yeah, I do think there is a value in who's work. Sometimes people are just having bad days. You might go into a conversation with somebody, and normally they probably would be normally okay, but they had a rough week or they're upset or again, I think that plays a big thing in it too.
Definitely.
So, I mean, I have bad weeks where communicating with me is like fucking nails on a chalkboard.
Tell me about it.
Just nothing but pain.
Tell me about it.
Well, as you well know, I go through periods of being very, very communicative and then go through periods of being a brick wall. Because that's the sort of person I am. So yeah, yeah, we all carry our own baggage when it comes to communicating with each other. I find it was a lot easier when I was younger. So I'm impressed that Ash has already accumulated enough baggage to be able to be at the point where I am another 10, 15 years later. Well done.
I don't think that's something to congratulate me for, but thank you.
No, I was being a little bit sarcastic and facetious there. I mean, it's still an impressive feat to have achieved at such a young age. But wow!
Oh, don't worry. I'll take the feat.
Yeah, but in response to your question of what do you say, hi, how are you, is a great start most of the time. Just throwing that one out there.
Yeah. And then you eventually move into things. Hey, I don't really know anything about you. I want to know more about you. Also, hi, I'm Raz.
But okay, so maybe I don't want to sound like a creeper. I don't know if you realize that's kind of how that sounds.
Explain my success. Explain my success.
Honestly, I can't. I don't understand.
That's my point, because you don't try.
Anywho, so what to a random person go, hi, how are you? I don't know about you.
It's what people used to do, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
Well, besides the point, today...
That's how people actually did it for centuries, actually.
But it's really quite interesting that once you step away from screens, you actually just, if you walked up to someone in the street and said, hi, nice to meet you, how are you? How receptive they'd be about it. But you move that interaction to online and immediately you're a weirdo.
And if they don't want to talk to you, they'll make it very apparent. Literally, the worst thing. Even if they said ew or fuck off or anything like that, because all you have to do is code it in your head that they're just saying no. Or they don't want to talk to you. Just because they're being extra set to be mean doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Some of that is they maybe the last person really was creeping or didn't take no for an answer, and so they're preemptively being much more aggressive because they don't want to deal with anybody. But amazingly, when you get somebody to talk about themselves, they'll go on for hours. Ask me why I know this.
Fair enough.
I have that tendency.
That's why I said, hi, how are you? Is a great start because it ends up, you're just immediately asking them a question about themselves. And everyone loves talking about themselves. Like, I am a self-proclaimed narcissist. So I also know well about this.
The biggest thing is finding something that they're passionate about and just letting them talk. That'll open some, even if you have no interest in it. I realize it. If you let somebody talk about something you're not interested in, and even if you have to feign interest, I know that sounds like a dick thing, but it's amazing how many friendships you can make, and it's actually nice to find people who are excited about something. Not obsessive, like, psychopathic about it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I was going to add that little codicil in there because there are some people that are just like, hi, how are you? And they start expounding, and you're suddenly going, help, I need escape.
Hey, I feel like that's a jab at me.
No. Well, I'm just thinking of, like if you ever saw the Jetsons cartoon where they start walking and, George Jetson's walking the dog and all of a sudden the dog goes crazy and starts running and George ends up, going around and around on this thing going, stop this crazy thing.
Right.
And conversations can get that way. And that's when you start having to go, okay, how do I extricate? And to a certain extent, I mean, that happens in the regular conversational world too.
Yeah.
Where somebody will start going off on something that I'm going to go ahead and use this phrase, even though I don't like it sometimes, when it makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that one, unfortunately, has lost some of its meaning, at least the proper meanings that it should have. But when I say uncomfortable, I don't mean, oh, that offends me, or oh, I don't happen to like that. It's actually seriously uncomfortable. Where you're getting into that fight or flight area of response,
Yeah.
But yes, being able to actually extricate yourself without sounding, totally dickish.
Yeah, it's not wanting to be rude. It's not wanting to be rude, right?
Yes.
I have a bad tendency of not wanting to be rude and trying to figure out how to say something in a way that's still to the point. And it might still sound a little assholish, but it makes sense, Or the person can get it without realizing I'm not mad at, it's the whole, I'm not mad at you or anything like that. That's a hard thing. Okay.
Yeah, something that I noticed, or that I enjoyed about Jordan Peterson, as I've been watching some of his interviews and such, is the interviewer. I mean, we're talking. This is a conversation for partially for knowledge, partially for entertainment.
Yeah.
And something that I noticed and need to apply more is his tendency to pause after a question. So when he's presented with something, either a specific question or what do you think about this, he will often deliberately go into almost like a contemplative mode, like he's actually studying and listening to what the question was and formulating a response to it that is coherent and cogent. And it's not like as somebody is talking that he's racing ahead and missing something because he's too eager to, well, here's my snappy comeback. There's a place for snappy comebacks every now and then, but the the pause to actually think about what he's saying is, to me at least, is a sign of respect, and that this person is actually listening to what is being said and considering it. And I kind of think that that would be something more useful these days, is to have that consideration rather than racing ahead and coming up with the counterpoints and just in general being all me, how do I counter all this stuff, but
Right.
actually considering things.
Well, funny enough, that's what I brought up before the podcast, specifically is, the things that I can't like. For me, I like having conversations. And the only time I get snappy, or if it's a joke, right? I'll make a snappy comment to make a joke. But it's more of being considerate and having a conversation's more important than trying to disprove somebody. If you disagree, you can do that in a way that is, again, Gordon Peterson is a great person. I love watching his videos. I started taking a lot of lessons from his specific style of conversation also. And I don't always succeed. He doesn't even succeed all the time with his, you know,
No,
with that. But that's the thing. That's okay. That's the thing that we have to start telling ourselves, that it's okay that we're not always perfect at these things. You know?
yeah, we're all fallible humans. We all make mistakes, and to forgive, it's a forgiveness thing.
Yeah.
You hope that somebody else will forgive when you make a gaffe or a glaring error, and gently
Yeah.
inform you of such.
Hey.
But yeah, it goes both ways. You have to be forgiving as well as be forgiven. And that's something that has lacked a lot from conversations nowadays. Is it's a confrontation, it's a battle, it's one of those mobile video games where you have to be constantly aggressive.
I think everyone's been so convinced that, like, and drummed into them that every conversation that they have, it's a personal attack almost. It's like, if you believe in this, then anyone that disagrees with you is like personally attacking you, is almost what's been built into people. So when they do come across like an opposing idea that someone's trying to communicate with them, they start reacting like in an emotionally defensive way, as opposed to a coherent, rational, thought out argument, like a debate. It's not a debate, it is an emotional argument that people are getting into more often than not. And this is what I'm seeing more often. And it's, and I feel it in myself sometimes, like when I'm having conversations with people where you've actually got to fight the urge inside yourself, where you're going, why am I reacting emotionally? Like, this is a personal attack on me. Like, these people aren't me. The things that are happening in the greater world are not necessarily my direct responsibility. So why am I feeling like I need to sort of go, ah, and attack back almost, when that's not going to solve anything? I know that's not going to solve anything. You try and articulate thoughts, but that's, I think, very much the mindset of where a majority of people are coming from. And I think a lot of isolation over the last few years has not helped that.
Yeah.
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 And text does not confer emotion.
No.
At all.
Yeah. No. We've talked about this before, about the being in someone's physical presence when you're having a conversation, even from their voice alone, like what you get from their inferences
Yeah.
versus what you read when you read it in text is just a million miles apart.
It's kind of funny is I have another point is like, but that whole thing with inversing with voices, like, funny enough, part of the reason that I'm only doing this with voice is that I I've done voice for so long, and this is kind of where I mastered. Some people I don't get, but I can usually read people just through the way they talk. It's really funny all the things you can learn from that. It's not an imperfect thing. It's not a science. Like, we know it's
Like
partially true.
teleology.
Well, we know it's partially true, but again, you do need facial and stuff. Like, there's a whole thing with it. But it's kind of funny how much you can figure out the way that people respond, how they talk when they're upset. Like, I can usually tell the first time when I talk to somebody's like today when you came on, I could immediately tell there was, you were either tired. I may not know exactly, but there is something wrong. You know?
Yeah, I'm just worn down. Like I feel like personally, and then just interjecting my own like wah onto this. I just feel like I spent most of my summer being ill or in pain in some way or another, and it's just grating on me, and I'm exhausted, and life doesn't stop just because I'm feeling like shit. So I just keep going and never get a chance to rest. And now I'm just wah. I'm just getting to the point where I'm over it. So
Well,
I'm bringing that to the table. I'm trying to leave it at the door, but yeah, it just grinds on you a bit, doesn't it? Every now and again.
yeah. I think part of that though, and I think this is something that a lot of people don't do, and again, something I ran into. I'm sure Terranax understands this too. There's a point where you just have to make time for yourself and to let it and to do that. And if you can't, you have to communicate with somebody about it because that
Yeah,
emotional drain is way harder than the physical that you're feeling.
Yes.
yeah,
And it is very definite. There are times that you need that, what you call you time.
Yeah,
You're not having to deal with the outside world, preferably even some of the responsibilities. Sometimes you just need to, um, I'm going to say sometimes gamers, and I'm saying sometimes because there are a bunch of gamers that are into it for multiple different avenues, but there are a core of gamers that they don't do MMORPGs or things where they're in with a whole bunch of other people. They do something that is completely by themselves where they can lose themselves in the game. Book people are another one where they will get lost in the world that is being created in the book because they need to get away from pretty much everything and contemplate things internally. And that is something that just as much as conversation, the sharing of ideas, sometimes it's ordering, you have the library in your head that you need to sort everything through so that you don't end up with like a hoarder's house with newspapers everywhere. Sometimes you need to sort it out. And being on your own to actually think about some of these things is actually an important portion of doing the conversation and expressing your ideas to someone else.
yeah. But also, the worse you feel mentally, also the worse you will feel physically too. We know that there is a connection with that. That's another thing I was pointing out. And I'm actually that
Oh yeah.
gamer you were talking about, Terranac. I am that. I'm,
Pardon?
I'm both of those people. When it comes to books and stuff, I'm absolutely that type of person.
yep.
Um, like, if you want to know when I'm doing the most thinking, is when I'm sitting and playing a game and I have a video. Like, I just put something on the background,
Yep. Or I play music.
and that's where I do most of my thinking. I lose myself in the game, but it's like it just keeps me having those multiple things. It's almost like an overwhelming sensory overload. Lets me focus a lot better. You know?
Well, by giving your mind different things to work on at the same time, um, especially when it comes to, I'm going to use the term menial tasks. Um, washing dishes, sweeping a floor, just repetitive motion where you don't necessarily have to engage large portions of the mind uh, to perform whatever operation it is.
Muscle memory. Anything that you can do sort of by muscle memory. I mean, it's because you've got there's two separate parts of your brain that work in slightly different ways. So you've got your sort of kinetic part and your cognitive part. So it's the bit that controls all your movements. If you can do something that you can do by muscle memory to the point where you don't actually need to be using the cognitive part of your brain, it allows you to be sorting your subconscious in a way that you sort of do when you're dreaming, which is why people find that if you get anything that you do like monotonously, where if you're game and you can do it where you're not actually even thinking about it, you know the game inside out. Drawing, Ash will get this from drawing, where it's like you're drawing, you know what you're doing, and then once you're into the flow of it, that's it. Your brain goes off somewhere else. Like I'm like it when I do various of my little crafty things that I do. And last year, when I went through a really bad patch, my whole thing was making sure that I was listening to podcasts constantly whilst doing something with my hands. Because I was like, if I control both parts of my brain at the same time, then I don't have time to think about shit. So I was actively using this information against myself, self-sabotaging to make sure that I wasn't processing or dealing with any shit. It goes to show, you know, how toxic you can be towards yourself when you really, really try.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think on that,
Okay.
Paranak? What you said?
I concur pretty much with all of that, and like I say, learning to deal with yourself. I think that's something that is lacking a wee bit today. In today's culture, is there is so much emphasis on um the likes and the shares and the tweets and all these different things that are uh, some kind of like self reward. People like me, they really like me, and everything is driven on who likes you.
Yeah.
And most of the time, people will like a certain aspect. But when they're dealing with, millions of people, they're dealing with, okay, this group of people likes this aspect of you. This group of people likes that aspect of you. And they'll argue in the comment sections about what it is that they like.
Yeah.
And Abe Lincoln said, you can, please some of the people some of the time, all of the people some of the time, or some of the people all the time, but you can't please all the people all the time because we are all individuals. As
Yeah.
soon as you start blocking yourself into I am this, that, and the other label, and then not defining those labels. Yes, you may follow those aspects, but when you define yourself by labels, you're locking yourself into a box. And if you've ever been like woke up wrapped up in a blanket, you can't move, how that restrictive, almost panicky feeling. I kind of think that people, when they're getting into the conversation, they get locked up into these I am this, therefore I must be that. And humans aren't that way.
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely become a culture of things fitting inside boxes, which is bizarre because it's almost like individuality went so far that we now have to. There are so many different types of individual that you can only be like one of them.
Well,
You
no.
can't be a spice of all these different things in this sort of like online culture
Yeah.
where all of news and the society, sort of the things that are projected into the mainstream media as what society is nowadays, is all based on this sort of like very, very skewed perception.
Well, we walk a fine line in society because society is a group of individuals, and there are certain things that we agree upon. And it took us years and centuries to discover certain things we agree upon. We're just in new territories when it comes to internet and stuff. But it's not that we have gone so far into being individualistic. It's that we have a drive to be. There's this whole thing about being driving to be special, and you're not special at all because you're not like the one thing I think the ultimate thing that you can say as an individual is that I am me. That's why I like the line I think therefore I am. I know that
I
sounds
was just about
ridiculous.
to say.
Huh?
I was literally about to drop that line then.
And we do give ourselves self labels, but I think the self labels should be through, again, people are not self aware. They don't go through the work of really understanding themselves. To what, like, again, I am a gamer and stuff like that. I grew up in the culture of gaming. I don't belong to every culture group. I definitely don't get along with a lot of the new ones because, well, they're either young or, it's the level of popularity has exploded, and now you have what people call normies. You know,
Mm.
and that's the reality of it. Like again, it's so broad, and then so you choose little things to make you specific. But the thing is that I don't need manga or gaming or any of this to dictate who I am. These are just little portions of the stuff that I like, and we attach ourselves to that thing because we want to feel like we belong. Because it sucks
This,
not knowing yourself. Oh, good.
well, and the stereotype,
Yeah,
the you are black or you are LGBTQIA or you are this, therefore you must think like the stereotype. And if
yeah,
you don't follow that, then oh, you have internalized misogyny, istphobe, you're blah 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 blah. It's like, no, just because I happen to have an attribute does not make my entire existence based upon that attribute. Everybody is different. They've gone through different things. Um, people that came up in the hood, they lived in the hood and decided I am not going to deal with it. And they do things and they
yep,
become professors and PhDs and doctors and all these other different things. And it's like,
right,
these are the same people that, you know, came from the hood, came from the bad area, came from poverty, came from whatever, distressing, hard life. And they decided, no, I'm not going to fit this stereotype. I'm not going to fall into what people expect. I'm going to do what I want to do. And they do it despite anything and everything. They overcome those obstacles.
yeah.
And
So,
those are the really impressive people.
One
You
second,
know,
guys. I wanna let's actually come to our resident expert teenager
Why?
because this is actually a bit fascinating thing to ask you about. You're dealing this with this. You're actually dealing with these things of the identity and the things that you're going through.
Yeah.
Be it all of us are older and dealing with the after effects of it, but you're living through it. But
get
it's
off my lawn!
I mean, but you guys know it's true. She's actually growing and living through it versus we have we so yeah. Why don't you fill in? What do you think about the things of identity and all this stuff?
Well, I mainly agree with you guys. Like, it's something you have to find yourself and do yourself and not be just whatever anyone else says you should be based on who you are, or at least what they think you are. There was a long time where I was doing that on my own. In other words, I was filling in what other people would be saying I would be. I locked myself into what I thought I was and just said that was it. That was all I was ever going to be. There was nothing past that. And then I met Raz. And I actually started thinking for myself and trying to progress on my own ideals and what I wanted to do. And it's getting better. I sure, I don't exactly have the job that I want to have, and I don't have all of the uh utilities that would be great for what I want to be, but I am working towards it, and I am setting up goals and completing things to get to that point. And it's something that's slow, and a lot of people do need to realize that. A lot of people think, I'm going to make it big on what I need to do, and I'm going to do it now. That's just not how that works. It's not. And especially with something like art, like I wanted to talk about last time, that I'm doing, it takes a lot of patience and determination to go through and figure out and make something unique for yourself that will stand out so you can get paid for what you want to do.
I mean, I was
yeah.
honestly, if there was a lesson that I could give my younger self, and I've said this for years, there was anything that I could say to my younger self, it would be patience is a virtue. It's the most cliche term, but there is nothing more relevant because time heals everything. Patience will get you everywhere. You've just got to put in the work and let time do its thing, right? Because it does. But you can't learn it until you do it. And when you're young, everything is in like it's got to be done now. I mean, it's just nice to hear someone of a young age be able to recognise that.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to eat and my jaw was acting up. I couldn't respond.
It's all right.
I wanted to make
Pretty
a
food
joke.
is more important.
I wanted to make a joke that when I was younger, the thing that I hated being told the most was patience is a virtue. Because there was always when I'm like, dude, just fucking do it already. What are you doing? You told me you would do this thing, and you're not fucking doing it. And then they'd be like, yeah, patience is a virtue. It'll come eventually.
No. Okay, patience is a virtue. But patience is only a virtue when you're actually doing action.
Yeah.
Someone who procrastination and patience are two different things.
Yes.
I have been patient with people, and people let me down all the time. I've always given people the benefit of the doubt until they don't. Then I don't anymore. But patience is about when you're doing action, when you're actually doing the thing, when, you know, and sometimes there are things that you can't do that you do have to wait for something.
You can literally just call it steady determination.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're going through it, you're still pushing through, but at a steady pace. Because it's not going to take 5 minutes to immediately get there. It's going to take time and your effort to make that point.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I love me some angel food cake. I mean, I love me some angel food cake, or cheesecake for that matter. But the thing is from the time it's like, I want some. Well, we'll say that I don't have the means to go out and just buy some pre-made, but I have the ingredients. It's like, yes, I can put it in there, I can do the thing, I can make it. But if I don't wait, if I take it out early, it's nasty.
Yep.
And I mean, we're not just talking nasty, it's nasty. The type where you're like spitting it out, going, ew, ew, ew. And that is that patience. There's this instant gratification. I want, therefore I get now, not in 10 minutes, not in half an hour, now. And it's gotten worse and worse. And the things that were considered conveniences because we were so busy, where we didn't have time to do a lot of preparation, have now gotten to the point where everything is expected in that same time frame. And it's like the best things, the things that taste like so heavenly that you just melt and you're just like, oh my God, this is excellent. Those are the things that take the time, and that time ends up being worth the wait. And there are so many that don't understand that particular thing, and it actually goes through all walks of life. If you get something immediately, okay, you get it, and you'll forget about it the next couple of minutes or something. Whereas if you've actually worked for something, you've dedicated months, maybe even years, the the final outcome when you have perfected whatever it is, or you actually get what you've been driving for, is so incredibly sweet, and the that satisfaction lasts for so much longer than, okay, I got my toy, I've played with it, and now I'm done. You actually have that pride and sense of accomplishment from accomplishing, from doing whatever it is that lasts you for a long, long time.
Yeah. Funny enough, I can tie that right back into conversations and meeting people and getting to know people. That's the same thing. Patience is virtue. You know,
Mm.
spending the time getting to know somebody. Sometimes you click with somebody immediately, but some of my closest friends weren't people that I like. Again, wasn't people that I just clicked with immediately. It's somebody that I spent a lot of time around. You know, um, and really got to know them. And again, I spend a lot of time with you guys when I get a chance to. I am the person that makes somebody stay up till 7, 8 in the morning. I've been
I
yelled at
have
a lot of
no
times.
idea. I have no idea what you're referring to.
Man, I wonder where I've heard it from. Almost like I am sitting right next to you when you do it and try and sleep while you're doing it.
I'm bad. I've done that. But when you do finally meet that person, or when you get into those conversations where you're actually very interested in something, like there have been times when I want to leave a conversation myself, but I'm so invested that it's hard for me to just go to bed or say, good night, you know? And a part of it is worrying that when's the next time you're going to talk to him, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like
Mm.
that meme about games. It's like, or it's peripherally related, but it's like, okay, I have to go to the work in the morning, and so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to be a good person, so I'm well rested and stuff. And just about the time where you're completely nodded off, you're drifting all over the place. All of a sudden, the brain goes, "Hey, I think I figured out how to kill that monster in that game." And all of a sudden, you're wide awake.
Yeah,
And some conversations are like that. It's like, oh, okay, this is getting, blah 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 blah. Wait, what? Wait, this is interesting. Now I'm invested, and you end up staying up much, much longer than you intended.
I think the worst thing for me is getting into a conversation and something, and I'll get into a specific topic that I don't know how to talk about or defend, or don't know enough about, or I don't know how to respond to the person at the time, right? And I'll do that. I will figure out exactly what I want to say, and I think I've done it with you guys here. Is I'll come back, right? It could be 2, 3 weeks down the line, but I will come back and say, "Hey, do you remember this conversation?" I actually have a response.
Yeah. And half the time you have to actually remind us of the conversations
Yeah,
and I'm not going to say all the time, but there are times when it's like, remember that conversation you had? Wait a minute, which one? We've had so many.
right.
Which
For
one are we referring to?
Remember
um,
that conversation from yesterday? Yes. The 7 hour long one that was multiple conversations. Which one? Wait, what?
anyways, I do explain myself, but it's and honestly, that's a great feeling too. Like, it's a great feeling when you're able to work out something that you weren't able to fully formulate, you know?
That's the great thing about conversations in general. Many of humanity's greatest achievements have come about by conversations like that, where something that may have been even just off the cuff and flippant. Well, we can't blah 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 blah. Will set you thinking, and it may take a couple of days or a couple of months, who knows, even a couple of years. But if something impacts you enough, you continue thinking about it and thinking about it, and then all of a sudden you end up with like Einstein, general theory of relativity. Einstein wasn't so much a instant genius as we think about it, as putting in a lot of thought and a lot of consideration into what he was doing. I mean, he was a genius in many of the classical terms that you would think about it, but
Yeah.
The it's 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration.
Right. Right.
It's like, okay, you got this inspiration, but you have to put the work into bringing it about. And even within a conversation, that is another point in the factors where you'll blurt out things that may or may not be very relevant or important in the conversation, where
Yeah.
after thinking about it for a while, and your explanation was a prime example of that. After thinking about it for a while, you remember it, and the next time something opportunity comes up in a conversation, the very fact that you've put that kind of effort into yourself, into thinking about these things, is what makes it even more interesting the next time you do have a conversation, whether it's with the same person or another.
Yep. What's your thoughts, Morgan?
Well, just thought that thoughts evolve. Like there's not much that I've come up with in my short life, my long life now, that hasn't been sort of inspired or motivated by other things. Like the whole idea of modern creativity is everything is inspired by other people, and like you say, when you have these conversations, like all these pivotal points in history where there have been things that have occurred just because you can't do that, and then it sets something going, and it sets a niggle in someone's mind. Like it's a small spark of inspiration inspired by other people, and it's the same way that thoughts evolve. It's the same way that science happens. It's the same way that and that's one of the things that I think is so dangerous about what's been implemented in through social networking in such a way that we have cut off so much communication in person in such a huge way, and then combine that with these massive lockdowns worldwide. And I know that you guys haven't been necessarily affected by them in your state specifically, Karanak. I don't know about you. But over here, obviously, we've been affected by it quite badly. And then you look at the things that are happening in Australia, and you can understand that when you start truly isolating people and you take away conversation, it's because conversation is where ideas come from, where revolutions spark from, where all the greatest things that humanity is most proud of has all come from communal existence. Like, people living amongst each other, people inspiring each other. Like, all art comes from inspiration by other people in the world around you. All of these things matter. And being able to have these conversations matters. Any conversation matters. And the moment you start taking away the things that we have spent thousands of years evolving this level of communication, right, and the understanding of communication that we have of other human beings through non-verbal communication, and you take that away in the space of one generation. And I mean, like, the implications are terrifying, really, and you're only starting to see the tip of the iceberg. And it's almost ironic because I don't know if any of you have actually seen it, but there's a musical called "We Will Rock You," which is all Queen songs.
Yep.
I don't think I've seen it.
Anyone seen it? Ben Elton, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It is fantastic, and it's set in the future, and it was written in like the 80s. And it's very satirical, sort of like, and it's all about how electric guitars get basic. This is the premise of it. Electric guitars are weapons of mass destruction, and they become illegal, and music becomes illegal, and there's no music in the world, and there's like this revolution of music going on. And in it, they've abandoned names. Nobody has names anymore. Everyone only has email addresses.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And it, for that to have been like, it made me laugh so hard in the early 2000s when I went to watch that in London. Now, like, what a sobering reality to be living
Yeah.
in a world where it's like, yeah, no, even us here. I mean, my name is my name. You know, I've always been a case of like, well, my name's unique enough that it doesn't need to be sort of like, I don't need a nickname, but we all go by sort of internet handles,
Yeah. We
you know,
choose.
and that's how we communicate with each other.
But I actually don't mind. That's something that I have gotten into a lot. Is I'm ignoring anonymity and stuff like that. One of the things that I've actually do like, and I think this comes with it, is like I don't mind being called Raz in real life because there's something kind of cool about a name you've built and created and an identity that you have shaped for yourself instead of others shaping it for you.
Oh, I
Yeah,
totally get
like
that,
people
and
call me Yuri.
I'm not taking away from it in any way. I'm just saying that it's quite a sobering reality that it
Yeah,
was almost like a satirical look on what the future could look like, and
yeah.
it's actually
I think
very real.
the worst part about what you were talking about with like email addresses is less about shaping to something like that is when you become a number or when you become a a what's the word I'm looking because even nicknames or handle names take a good one takes effort, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, like, I mean, I could go off into a side conversation about the fact that by having existing as digital presences right now is almost like becoming that number because of all the data sharing and everything else that goes along behind the scenes, and you know the very corporate side of what happens behind social networking. Not so much on Discord, not fucking bashing Discord at all, but
Yeah.
especially the more prominent, the ones that get mentioned in the news and get all that sort of stuff, all those sorts of social media platforms.
Yeah.
You are a number to them, as much
Yeah.
as you
Oh,
think
you
that
are a
you're an
number. Yeah.
identity.
Yeah.
You're not. But that's a different conversation, and that's one
Yeah.
for me and my tinfoil hat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're not wrong. We are a number. It's hard to keep up, to make that, when you're dealing with millions of people and stuff like that. This is even for YouTubers and stuff.
Yep.
Fans, you have certain fans that have faces, but most of them are just a face. Could you imagine having a million fans? You're a musician. Could you imagine if you got big playing an arena with 100,000, a million people? Can
I
you
can't
imagine?
imagine having 3 fans, mate. Don't worry.
And even if you
I'm
met
joking.
fans, you would only remember maybe 5 of them.
Yeah.
Maybe
You'd
5
remember
of them.
more. You'd remember more than that, but like no more than just a passing face in the crowd. Like
Well,
you do. It's surprising how good your facial memory like is,
yeah.
but beyond that, it's one of the reasons I am so bad with names. I have met so many people.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, you know, and I am terrible with names. So, and it to an embarrassing extent where it's not even like I can't even blame it on age. I've been doing it for 10 years, or if people I've known like half my life, and I'm stood there and they're having a conversation with me, talking about my family by first name basis, and I'm going, yeah, no idea who this fucking person is, and then find out, like, hours later that it's actually somebody I've known my entire life, and there's no reason why I shouldn't remember who the hell they are.
All right.
But that's just
That's
my
how it
brain
goes.
that malfunctions. Anyway, sorry, we're off on a ramble.
No, no. Actually, can I bring up a thought that I think is a positive thought though, and is an interesting thing on like our conversation on and how like something like this podcast happens, why these things happen.
Please.
It's not. I think it always starts with a negative reaction. The reality is, it does start with something's wrong, popping open, all this other stuff. It's actually why I dislike being the black pilled or whatever they call it, doomer and stuff like that. I think is useless because the fact that you are seeing something wrong but it brings something that's very human, a hunger, right? That's what they call it, hunger, a thirst, and then and again, you usually do start off not knowing who to talk to, and you sound like a crackpot, and you guys know what I'm talking about with this, like when it first starts happening, right? Especially
Yeah.
if you already been opinionated, right? But then
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Nah, nah. Mm-mm.
but when you're in the darkest part of it, you'll find that person, somebody or people that inspires, that fuels that thirst or hunger that you have, but you don't know what to do with it. And then once you're filled up with it, you start expressing. You start thinking, like like for me, I went through the same stuff. I found those certain people, very few, and again, luckily for me, those people stayed in my life. Even when I was at the worst of my time, and now one of them's our co-host, who's not
Woo.
here today.
No, I was going to say it's not me. It's definitely Happy.
Yeah. And then you go seeking those people out. If you really thought that it was the end of the world, you wouldn't seek out people. You know?
Mm,
Yeah,
I don't
seriously.
know.
If you thought everything was fucked, hear this out. This is why I'm always against the black pilling and the doomers thing, right? You're so believing that the world is ending that you go find other people who agree with you.
Echo chamber.
Oh, it's not just
Yeah,
an echo chamber. You're
the world's
literally
ending. It's just not happening overnight.
well, it's not going to happen. But I mean, again, regardless if the world is ending, the point is that the seeking, yes, the miseries. But if you can go find people, if you can discover people, if you can talk these things, you're not doing that because you think the world is ending. You're doing it because you want comfort, or you're thriving for something.
Yes.
And it only takes that one person, no matter how dark you are, that you can not only talk to, but inspires you to try to be past it. To point out how much of an idiot you've been. That's the biggest thing, right? Sometimes it takes a moron to point out other morons, though.
You would know.
I would know.
Makes one to know one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Okay.
I wanted to bring up 3 prongs now. I've been
No
keeping
problem.
quiet.
No, go ahead.
Speaking to Morgan.
Hello.
Another one is go back to the Rush album called 2112. And it has, again, dealing with music and stuff. The story is they live in this supposedly pastoral, tranquil society, and the person finds a guitar and makes beautiful music, and wants to show off how beautiful this is, and he goes to the elders and is shunned and shamed, and this brought down the elder race of man, and this is foolishness and everything. But music has language of its own, and many times when you listen to music from the different eras, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, so on and so forth, um, I have found, like with reactors especially, that they're starting to recognize this is an 80s sound, this is a 70s sound, and it isn't just the music, it's the feel, the
Yeah.
expression of what is going on around that seems to be very much reflected in the music a lot of times. Not all of it. There's variations. Um, to go into the dual personalities, I have a regular name. I deal with it in business and in real life, when I'm paying my bills and doing all the other stuff. That is the name that was given to me. You are this. And you try to make your own person out of that. I am this person, and so on and so forth. But that person isn't always what you want it to be. And so people create identities such as Terranum that is more of what you want to be. The things that interest you, that inspire you, some of the different activities or things that excite you become the secondary personality, the alternative that isn't necessarily facing the world, although it is, but it gives you a different outlet for various things. And in that regard, I do not think it is bad. whether it's something that you're good friends, you have family that is blood, and then you have family that is choice. The people that you hang around with because they care for you and they've got your back and everything like that. Those type of friends become the family, and sometimes they even take over or replace the blood family, because blood family isn't always the best for you. There are plenty of stories circulating about, the home life was horrible. There was this, there was that, and even though it may have been good and you just didn't recognize it, sometimes it wasn't good,
Yeah.
and people don't recognize it, and they become these new personalities. These negative things shape you and help you to identify those things that you do want around you, and that becomes your new family, your new tribe. And some of the internet communities have
Yep.
come up a little bit around that type of thing. And even though it is dangerous in that it can become an echo chamber where you keep hearing the same things that reinforce it, and
Yeah.
you need everybody needs to be challenged to rethink things,
Yep.
because just because something has been, well, this is the way it always was. There are so many times when some of the great inventions in history were, well, we've always done it this way, this is the way that it is, and somebody just kind of goes, no, wait a minute, and they take off on a different tangent, and all of a sudden we have some new fantastic technology that everybody said was impossible.
Yeah.
Oh well, and sometimes that's what's needed, not always, but sometimes. And so,
Can I add a little bit more? Because funny enough about what you were talking about with the personality thing, I should have probably finished the thought better on that one. Is I agree with you, and it can be dangerous to do that thing. Is what makes it the best is when you can unite the two worlds, which is the thing I struggle the most with my family. Is how do I be this person who I am with you guys around my family? You know, um, because to me, my friends online are my family. I've always had kind of a hard family life connecting, being an outcast. I was the black sheep in a lot of ways. You know, even if there were people worse than me, I always didn't connect well, and even now, I'm still having that struggle of being myself, who I am outside of everyone else. Because Raz and Michael, that's my name, Michael. To everyone else outside of my family, I act like this to you guys, like I'm acting around you, but I don't. It's always a struggle to do it with my actual family, to be that person.
I think part of that is just the expectations.
I
Your
agree.
family, when they're teaching you, they are instilling their viewpoints, their values, their you are an extension of themselves, and so they strive to to a certain extent make a mini me.
Right.
This person is an extension of me. This is the continuation of my legacy, my existence. And so when you become a different person, it becomes disappointing to them, and they strive harder to try and stuff you back into the mold that they created. And humans don't stuff into molds very easily.
No, no, we don't.
And the good families recognize that each person is going to be unique and they're going to go their own direction, no matter how good you were or even how bad you were, as it were. They are going to go their own directions because they are a separate human. And the best you can hope for is that they at least take uh, uh, some of what you have offered to them, and they make use of it. And families are like, again, I brought you into this world. You have to listen to me. No, thank you for bringing me into the world. That was very nice of you. But when it comes to my life, you've lived your life. These were your choices. They're not mine.
Yeah.
And there's a constant struggle with that. And especially now because of the differences in parenting styles over the past
Yeah.
couple of decades.
Yeah.
Each one was, well, I'm not going to be my parents. I'm going to do it this way. And then, well, I'm not going to be my parents. I'm going to do it this way. And some of them have been overly restrictive, the helicopter parent.
Yeah.
And that backfired
Yeah.
immensely in many cases. Other ones have been far too lenient, which has backfired. It's that finding balances that and no single balance works. There's different
Oh yeah.
balances for different people.
Yeah.
And
I
just
think the
just as
weirdest
in
one is Ashley, actually, because she had both of those things, a helicopter parent and a lenient parent. Because she was
Yeah,
never there when she needed her, but when she was the worst helicopter, overprotective. She stunted her in so many ways that I had to show Ashley how to go pay at a convenience store to go up to the cash register. That
wait,
is how
what?
bad it was. Yeah, when she moved in with me, she did not know how to do basic things
I'm
because her
sorry.
yeah.
yeah. The thing is, if your parent legitimately actually calls themselves, this is what she called herself, by the way, a dragon mom, you know it's going to end badly.
That's when you find St. George the Raz.
uh, I just want to point out that there are weird extremes too, where you take both extremes are also bad. There is a finding a balance, you know.
And and even though perfect balance is bad because it leads to stagnation,
Yeah,
extremes lead to destruction. It's getting in between where there's a constant slight imbalance that moves you, that keeps you moving, so that you're not stagnating. You're constantly moving in one direction or another, but not to the point where the ground is not solid underneath you.
stability. You
Trying
need the stability. You need that foundation. You need something that's not going to fall, no matter how crazy it gets on the top.
exactly. You can't build a house on quicksand,
Nope.
and you can't build it on the side of a hill without special measures.
Yep.
So
Uh,
you need to have things fairly steady, yeah.
yeah.
And
Valhad.
conversations again, that's something else leading back in. Conversations also need that kind of a balance as well. Of don't go to those extremes. Yes, you may hold those views, but try to find those middle grounds where, okay, we do not agree on anything else, blah, 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 blah. But we can agree that we don't like this or we do like that. And then you build from that stable area in between. And
Yeah.
suddenly you realize that maybe, possibly, you're not as extremely different as you think you are. There are still going to be things that you're going to you agree to disagree,
Yeah.
but people are a lot more alike than they are different.
And that's true. And that's actually like again, going into like the society and things. We didn't build governments and stuff like that for like just for security and stuff like that, or have these. Yes, we had to use to have monarchies, but the reason that we gather and we set rules and stuff like that is so we have that steady foundation to all the other craziness that comes, right? And
Yes,
again, we found this out over long periods of time. The whole reason that we built the way that, like, say, American governments or like how we did is because we don't want a bunch of warlords. You know, we don't want a ton of these other people. We want that certain level of security. Like, again, if somebody tries to take your home, we have a police force. That's the original initial idea of a police was not just important. Was certain things that we as I'm talking about America, not other countries, because they have police for all kinds of different reasons. They even call them different. Like and but I think they're all called police now. But like again, I think in Britain for a long time they were called constables. That's what they were called. You know,
No, a
right?
constable is like a level of police officer.
What's that?
a constable is like a level of police officer, and the constabulary is like a different word for the police force, but they are the police.
Yeah, they're all the police now.
Police for a very long time.
Yeah. But its initial thing was just to enforce, but we do have that because that's what protects you. Like why we don't want a non-government and stuff like that. That's why you can leave your home and you don't have to worry about somebody moving in on your stuff. That doesn't mean somebody won't rob you, but they can't take your home. Make sense?
Yeah, and I was formulating things right along that lines of that agreement of uh, somebody may be bigger, nastier, stronger than you are, and may just want to come in and take your stuff. You've worked hard on doing all this stuff, and they just want to come in and take it. "Oh, that's mine now. Wait, I worked for this. I
Yeah.
spent years getting this, and you're just going to take it with, no other thing than I want it."
Yeah.
And that is where that kind of that societal government and or governance and recognition of certain things belong to the person that made it or
Yeah.
did it, and having a group or some way of enforcing that, so that when that big nasty person comes in there and says, "Give me all your stuff," you have a recourse to either defend it, get it back, or punish,
Yeah.
as the case may be, those persons that just want to come in and take. And that's one of the things that amused me most about the BLM and some of these other ones about, defund the police, defund the police. It's like, oh, they scream about this and oh, they're so bad and blah, 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 blah. But the first second that you disagree with them, just disagree, not even do anything to them, just disagree. What do? They scream for the police, arrest
Yeah.
them, throw them in jail. It's
Yep.
like, wait a minute, you just said you don't want the police. You said defund the police because they're doing bad things.
Yeah.
So which is it? Do you want them there so that they protect you? With the possibility that they may go overboard and do something bad, but you try to prevent those things. I mean,
Yeah.
for any given police force, the amount of bad police are an incredibly small fraction.
Yeah, and with a lot of good police officers quitting, we're getting more. We're now seeing a lot more of those bad police, in my opinion.
Right.
You know,
The ones that want it for the power.
Yep. Yeah, and again, this goes into another thing, but it's like the societal thing with that, like with police is another thing. But what you were talking about, the next part is, but this is also why we allowed people to have guns and the ability to protect yourself when the police couldn't be there.
Yeah.
Why we have these things, and people don't understand this concept now because the idea is like, well, the police. It's like, do you know how many crimes the police actually solve every year? Do you know how many people get hurt because they don't have a way to defend themselves?
Oh yeah, very much so.
Again, the gun was the great equalizer for a reason. Good or bad. Yes, it makes it easier to do certain things, but it also made somebody who was the poor farmer or the people out where I lived. Like, if somebody come in and broke in and tried to kill me and my family, like the police would never get here on time.
No, you'd be dead. They'd have your stuff, and then they'd get away with it to do it to somebody else.
Yeah.
As Alex says all the time to me, he says an armed society is a polite society.
It's still going to come with the negative. It's still going to come with the negative that people are like, there's still going to be unnecessary deaths, but it'll be a lot less often because people are still people.
Yeah, but I mean, I've lived my whole life not really understanding like the Americans bearing arms and the passion at which you guys do so until the last few years of my life. And I've just sort of like, yeah, the American, like, as I've said to you, Raz, a number of times, the American Constitution is a beautiful thing that should be treated as sacred. And unfortunately, as we've discussed, it's got so many holes in, but that Second Amendment right is something that you guys have got to hold on to. My God, you've got to hold on to it, because it could not be more apparent in places where, in the rest of the world, where people are going like, wouldn't it be nice if we had that ability right now?
Well, I
You
mean,
know?
yeah. How many unlawful arrests have there been just in? We're talking about bad police. I remember a story of an old lady went to a police officer. It was recorded, right? Went to a police officer and said, "Hey, there's not supposed to be any praying in this park. You guys have had this, but you have a bunch of these, and they were Muslim praying, right? They came later and arrested her for it
Oh, I'm like I
because
said,
she rocked. Oh, good.
yeah, the rocking of the boat type of thing. But there's also the incredible amount of absolutely idiotic laws
Yeah,
that are still in the books because they never get purged.
yeah.
I mean, there are things like don't put ice cream in your back pocket on a Sunday. That's a law in my state.
You know why
It's
it's a
like,
law. You know why
what?
it's a law. You know why it's a law.
Oh yeah, I know the reason why,
The
but it
horse
was like,
thievery. Yeah, horse thievery. But
yeah,
yeah,
but like I say, the thing is it was never purged.
yeah,
We're
Yeah,
not walking around with horses, and I mean, we're not,
yeah.
ice cream in your back pocket isn't going to do anything other than give you a wet butt, wet
Oh,
sticky butt.
in the
oh,
UK, just to put it out there, in the UK, you can still be hung for killing a swan.
okay.
That's
We
law. That's a law that is still on the books. You can still go through public hanging for killing a swan. I don't think anyone enforces this law, but yeah, that is still a law because it is the Queen's bird.
we do have an asterisk on a lot of what we call blue laws. Yeah, they're still there, but and again, bureaucracy is bureaucracy for purging. But there are asterisks. These aren't enforced anymore, and they aren't enforced. They can't be like again, but it's getting them
Uh,
out of the paperwork. Well, at least in
that's
America,
exactly
they're
what I
asterisks.
mean.
Yeah,
Well, it's
you can still be
and this is
fined though, right? For killing a swan.
Yeah. I mean, like any animals around here, you're not really. There's not much permission to go out and
Right.
don't
What were you
kill
saying, Terry?
anything, don't touch anything, don't breathe, don't fucking talk to anyone.
Right.
Don't go in that shop. Don't fraternize with people. Nothing. Yeah, that's
Right.
the UK right now.
Yeah. What were you saying, Taranak, after that? I was just explaining because I actually did a lot of research into blue laws some years ago when I heard that. Because that law is
yeah,
also in Kentucky too, by the way. It's
yeah.
the bad part isn't, but Kentucky, known for the bluegrass state and the Derby and stuff like that, used to be by death. I don't know if there, but here it was by death
Yeah.
because those horses were everything. They were money, like
Well, and
lots of money.
like I say, they made sense at the time, but
Yeah,
purge it.
yeah,
We're not doing this anymore. So you just say we're striking this law and just
yeah,
remove it. That's all you have to do. Remove it.
yep,
But as I was saying, sometimes you get some of this ridiculousness that's in the books, and people can and do still utilize these crazy ancient laws that really shouldn't even be there anymore. But I've
yeah,
witnessed where somebody's dug through and found something and pressed the issue. And
yeah,
even though there was kickback of no, that's not meant to be, it's not enforced, it's not this, and the person rightfully was able to say it's still a law. You are the people that are supposed to enforce the laws, enforce this law, and people have been screwed over because of that.
yeah.
And
That's
it's like, what?
actually funny
And
enough. Funny enough, the whole thing of what you were just talking about that they're like you're the ones supposed to enforce the law. And again, you can make that argument, but again, that flies in the face of our justice system, of the spirit of the law. The law is unjust and stuff like that. Yes, they should strike. Sometimes they haven't got to them. Sometimes they get lost in time. It's funny because the only reason we know the blue law is because somebody actually dug them up like 20 years ago.
well,
Nobody knew
yeah,
these
to a
existed.
certain extent. Oh yeah,
Um,
but the thing is that should be done. That should be done.
yeah,
I mean, just like your own personal thoughts and conversations. You
yeah,
should always, if something is there and it has some nugget of I don't want to call it insanity, but being inappropriate anymore.
Right.
Those nuggets of thought and conversational pieces are they should be dug up and re-examined and say, okay, does this still stand?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that science does all the time.
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
be honest.
Gravity
Let's
is
be
the
honest.
law, but they still experiment and they still bring it up every time. Well, when I
Yep.
toss this ball up, does it still come down? Yes. Okay, then gravity is still valid. But
Right.
when it happens that they toss the ball up and it keeps going, then they're going to sit there and go, okay, maybe we need to look at this.
Right. What are you saying, Morgan?
And that's
I was just going to say, with all the bureaucrats, the middle management, the secretaries, the receptionists, all the people that are employed by all the different parts of government throughout the entire country, surely they've got to be paying someone enough to sit there and go through these old files and strike shit from the records that isn't relevant anymore.
I'm
No,
actually agreeing
surely
with
there's
Tara.
enough money aside to pay someone's salary for a year to just sit there and go through old laws and debate whether or not they need to be on the books anymore. Surely we channel enough into government.
Do you guys want to know why blue laws aren't easily struck down? And it's dumb. It's as dumb as you think it is. The biggest reason for it is that any law that needs to be struck down, you would think it'd be easy with how easy it is to make a law. It's actually a lot harder to get rid of them, even if they need to be struck down. And that's because we went way too bureaucratic. Starting from the 60s, we became way more bureaucratic. And those laws were still in place at those time periods because that is way before we, because again, we did still have a pretty strong, like, even though we had vehicles and cars, even by the 60s, when all the stuff would have been started being mixed and ignored. We were still using horses and stuff like that all the way until the 40s and stuff in a lot of areas, and horse thievery was still a problem. I'm just talking about that one, but like a lot of blue laws, it's just hard to get rid of them. And you can't just put somebody there. You can't just put somebody there based on how now, if you clear out all the bureaucracy and did all that and had a team of people to go through and find all these dumb laws and then have a judge strike them, I'm with you guys.
Well, okay. I just wanted to bring up a really quick comparison.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever seen the photograph of Margaret Hamilton standing next to the program that sent us to the moon?
Yeah, I do know the picture. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a stack of paper that's just a little bit taller than she is. Not that she was tall, but it's about like 5.5, 6 feet tall. And it's like, okay, this is the entire program written on primitive computers that sent us to the moon.
Yep.
Then you compare the latest crop something or other from Congress that is also this big to define something about crops and some niggling bull about some crops.
Yep.
And it's bigger than what sent us to the moon. And they have to deal with, Congress is churning out forests of paper that way. Now, part of it is because people will interpret and stuff. Well, put it in plainer language. That would help for one.
Oh, yeah, everything's written in legalese. Like, on purpose. Everything's written in legalese, and I fucking hate it.
Yes. But, okay, instead of spending massive amounts of time writing, piles of paper or piles of laws that are as tall as a person, maybe write ones that are half that big and devote that other half of the time to looking at the old laws that are useless and present them. It should be a simple vote.
Yeah.
Is this law worthy or not? And you could probably get, hey, is this law worthy or not? Yes or no. You get say a major majority, like 75%, say this is idiotic. Strike it. Boom, gone.
Yeah.
Now you've reduced some of that stuff. And it really doesn't take all that much extra. Comparatively speaking, it takes more for them to put their PowerPoints and their things and publishing all these laws and all the other stuff. It's like, instead of doing that to add ever more laws, how about reducing some of them?
Yeah. Also, how about we enforce the ones that are already in the books instead of convoluting it more with extra things that say the same thing.
And I hate to use this as an example, but it's like, my goodness, 10 commandments was good enough for God.
Right?
10. How many do you need?
What are
I
you
mean,
talking about? What are you talking about? A Bill of Rights of 10 rules that's good enough for America, let alone.
Yeah, but if you look at it, the Bill of Rights is just considering the first 10 amendments. How many amendments actually are there?
28. There's 28 now, I think. 27?
Yeah. So,
Something like that.
and two of them, one was to enforce something and one was to rescind it.
Yep.
So two of them are redundant, but they're still there.
Yeah,
But
well, the second one, yeah, go ahead.
But the point being is that adding more and more and more does not necessarily make a system better.
No.
Sometimes you have to sit there and prune the bushes, as it were, to make a more thriving and healthy overall life.
Yeah.
And sometimes, that's another thing. Conversations help with that pruning process of saying, hey, this is no longer useful, or hey, this is backwards, or however you want to put it. This is no longer something that I should consider valid. And that conversations and discussing the merits and the faults, conversation is very, very important. Not to look at it from this is right and that's just the way it is and there's no others talking about it. That is the point. You need to talk about it, because things that don't make sense, which is kind of where I was going with the original idea, of these crazy laws. It's you need to discuss things. There are many people that would sit there and play Judge Dredd. It is the law. And it's no.
Well,
just because it has been does not necessarily mean. We need to have conversation. We need to have exchange of ideas without having the emotional baggage of, well, it is, this is just right. This is just this, and there's no challenging.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, is challenging and growing constantly. That's why we are where we are now.
I want to point out something about like a lot of laws and stuff like that, is that each state for America, we're a little different. Each state has its own Congress and stuff like that. I think a lot of people don't realize that we all have our own Supreme Court system,
Right.
And the thing about American laws, and you talked about there's like all these amendments now, but those are 28 amendments for 200 years because of how difficult it is to add laws. Is the Constitution. And the idea, and the thing is I want to point out that most of these laws, like, it should not be that easy to just create a law. Or change something. Like, we have these laws that we should have been getting rid of, but the reason the bureaucracy is so bad is they're churning out laws, and the Supreme Court we have now doesn't even do its job. I was just going to finish up, is just, if a law goes against the Constitution, and I want to point out, there is no interpreting the Constitution. It is as it's written. It was supposed to be designed that way. And they're trying to make it into a living document. That's what they call it, a living... The Constitution is not a living document. Was never a living document. What it says is what it is.
Yes.
And if a law comes out that goes against that, it doesn't matter if it's a state law or anything else, if it goes against the Constitution, is supposed to be ignored, completely stripped of any power. And that is what the Supreme Court's supposed to do, and they're not supposed to be able to draft up thousands of laws a day.
Yep.
For approval or anything like that. You're not supposed to have a system where you have a bunch of people who agree with each other in Congress and stuff like that, trying to push those out. Again, this is actually, the court justices were never supposed to be decided by a president.
Well,
again, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, like, and the power that they wield too. They get selected and they're there until they die.
Yeah.
Which is wait a minute.
Well, you got to remember the
But
original concept of it. A judge who becomes a Supreme Court justice is supposed to know he needs to know a lot about laws, but he only has to know 28 laws and base every law they see on those 28. That is it. That's why
sure,
they can stay in office, because their only job is to see if it's constitutionally binding.
right. And many people think, again, with the changing of definitions and stuff like that, there are so many people that really do not understand what government and how it's supposed to work.
Yeah,
We used to have civics.
yeah.
We used to, that was one of the primary classes. You had to have civics in order to graduate so that you did understand how laws work. I mean, they used to have the PSA things, the Schoolhouse Rock, where they would go through and describe, that whole process. Yes, it was in a cutesy cartoon way, but
I love that
it was
show.
still perfectly valid.
Yep.
This is how it works, so that everybody knows how it works rather than coming up with their own crazy concepts of how they think things work.
Yeah, and even when they do it, like Ashley was in a class that was supposed to teach Tennessee law and everything like that, it's poorly done.
Oh, fuck that class.
It's poorly done. Doesn't actually teach you anything really about Tennessee law or why they do the things. And one of the things that I keep wanting to point out to people, the state constitution, like a state has the right to do these things. Stop trying to put the constitution as just a federal thing.
Oh no, the
The
federal
const
covers all of them.
well, there you have state versus federal, but the whole thing about the Constitution is it's the rule of the land against everybody, and that's why it can't be changed. Even the Fed cannot change the Constitution like that.
Oh
You know what
no,
I mean?
you've got to
It's
get ratification by uh
a lot. It's
35 or 40 of the states.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's even higher than that. I think it's 45. Like because the idea is it has to be so unanimous.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And I mean, there have been ones that have come pretty close to
Yeah,
becoming ratified,
yeah.
and they'll take years to get to that point. Um, for that specific, those specific reasons. And
But yeah,
the Constitution is the base. States
yeah.
can build upon those. They can't
Right.
define them, but they can build upon them and further define certain portions.
And
But
and I've had arguments from police officers and stuff on this whole thing. And again, I'm all for states' rights, but you have to understand, you have to be a constitutionalist. When you start defying the Constitution to put state laws like anti-gun laws, you are defeating the purpose and why you became a state in the first place. You couldn't become a state back in the day without
well, and
accepting the Constitution.
well, something else that I think is kind of interesting, and I'm hoping this won't be a tangent. I'll try to keep it short. But
Yeah,
one of the things that has muddied the water is the whole thing on the drug wars.
yeah,
Okay, like especially with the marijuana,
yeah,
uh, be specific. There are many states that have decided that marijuana is legal,
yeah.
and according to the Fed, it's still illegal. But here's the thing, okay? According to the Fed, it's illegal, but that is not a
Yeah.
constitutional law. It is not. It is a federal law, but the thing is it does fly in the face of the Constitution, and technically, it is an unconstitutional.
Yeah, it is.
Um, and so, that's how states can kind of sort of get away with doing that for the most part. You'll still get the DEA that comes in and tries to do a raid, but now the states are sitting there going, no,
Yeah.
that's not a constitutional slash federal law. This is an additional thing that you put on us, but we're not bound by that portion unless it's
And
part of the
yeah.
Constitution.
I also want to point out that federal law is supposed to be is only supposed to set like strict things like again death penalty like it's supposed to set guidelines of laws that they're supposed to implement, right? No murder or anything like that, which is agreed upon by everyone, right? These are things we all can agree on. and then states have to decide how they implement something or what they implement. I think drugs like marijuana and stuff like that should be a state discussion. I think
Yes.
most of these things should be state discussions. And the feds and the state can fight all they want on this whole thing, but that's how it's supposed to work, by the way. Is the states and
Yes.
feds are supposed to fighting with each other to protect us.
Yes.
The Fed has been given too much power. Hey, Morgan, you haven't been quiet for a while. What do you think? What's your thoughts on our on all this from Britain's standpoint?
I mean, I'm struggling to stay awake. I'm not gonna lie. I mean,
it's all right. We're gonna be ending here soon.
I don't know the ins and outs of sort of like your federal and state systems. I mean, I think smaller government is obviously the way forward. Anyway, even in a small country like ours, I'd still like it to be smaller government. I think there's a lot of people in this country that feel the same way, and that's when we've got 4 countries joined together and we're all tiny. You know, and we've all got our own independent governments separate from the main government.
Yeah.
But you've got to manage an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
So,
well, right. This is actually why federal. Well, this is why federal is supposed to. Its biggest thing is not trying to govern everywhere, like the whole states. It's just supposed to set guidelines, like I said. And then its biggest job is to infrastructure of roads, make sure schools are built, and dealing with our foreign affairs. That is the biggest thing that our federal government is only supposed to handle.
You know what my point of view on it is that it is broken. Like, you know, the fact of the matter is that in on paper, the American government is a solid governmental system, and it allows the people, it gives the people more freedom, more rights than any other place on the planet. However, the actual application of it at this moment in time is becoming a very, very corrupt. I mean, it has been for a long time a very corrupt system.
Yeah.
It's insidious. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, not because there's no willingness to communicate from either side at the moment. I mean, like, and I know that we're like that in the UK, but not quite to the extent that it's gotten so poisonous where you guys are. So yeah, I mean, like, you know, you've got the federal government is implementing laws. States are just flat out just not responding to it. Like some states are listening and some states are just doing their own thing. I think the federal government is applying its hand far more than it fucking needs to a lot of the time. I mean, when you say it's supposed to be there for the infrastructure, is it doing that? Like,
it's state-based now.
Right now healthy? Are your roads good? Are you know, is all the things, are all the things working as they should be? Like, you know, are you happy with it? Are you happy with the, you know, the amount of money that's been spent on it over the amount of years that you've channeling money into these things? Like, you know, I'm not there on the ground. I only get to see things through a TV screen.
Yeah. Again, it's everything's either gone ultra private, which means like, okay, I'm not going to get into that. I have some problems with the ultra privatization. It's probably why, even though I'm a capitalist at heart, I still fight with a lot of capitalists on some of their opinions. Because I like having a nuanced view. I like to look at things from reality than just something that's good on paper. I know how it's supposed to work on paper. I know how it's going to fail, and I know what steps are to be necessarily taken. And the funny thing is, all those steps have already been written, and we ignore them. You know, we've been defeated in a lot of different ways, but you know, you have, and when I say ultra privatized, these are companies that are private companies who are still getting government, either through law. You know what I mean? Like, they're still using the government system.
This is what I mean. You know, there's so many hands in so many pockets. The way the political system is now is it's so heavily money orientated, so heavily influenced. Is you know, and I mean, going back in my tinfoil hat theory, there was a point when the Democrats realised that, you know, they needed to do things, everyone needed to run things in a different way, and then they were the ones that became friendly with the corporations, and then all the lobbying got worse, and all that sort of stuff. So most of the people that you see on the screen who are representing you, quotation marks, you know, they are heavily funded to say certain things and to sway in certain directions, and that's how they end up with the big fat bank accounts and
Well,
the
yeah,
mansions and all the
yeah.
things that you're not supposed to have by being a public servant. Like, and that's where the system falls apart.
Saranac might
Because
know
you
a
know,
little bit about this. Actually, I'm about to bring up something kind of something specific that I hate that government and private companies and these things have done. Do you know when something's been written by a lawyer and when something's actually been written by an engineer or somebody who knows what they're talking about? Is when they put way too many restrictions and they meander and you can't read it. Tell me that's not wrong, Taranac.
Yeah, I mean, the it's and I can't define it quite that closely, but it is very strongly with the whole with people that are ill-informed about things, and
Yep,
their intent is not to make things better, but to restrict,
yep,
to 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 restrict some portion of the populace from doing something that they in particular do not want to happen.
yep.
Not not even a personal thing, but it's like I don't want anybody else to here's an example. It's not actually true, but um I don't want anybody else to practice any other kind of religion.
Yeah,
Even though I'll never meet this person, I'll never get in contact with them, when they sit there and try to put those kinds of restrictions on there, that's where things start falling apart. You may or may not remember the PMRC. I don't even remember what the damn acronym stands for, but
I know the acronym, but
basically,
I don't know who they are.
yeah, basically, and this is funny, Tipper Gore, Al Gore's wife,
Yeah.
and a couple of other high-placed, political
Oh, them. Yeah.
busybody people decided that rock and roll music was evil and bad and needed to be restricted and have labels put on it. Now, on the one hand, yes, I can see that. I can kind of sort of see their point of view. Because unless you're monitoring the things that your kids are doing, sometimes they can be listening to something, and if you haven't recognized it, and all of a sudden you hear it, and you're like, "What the heck are they listening to?" It'd be um, and the way that they did it, it was like to put it in a context, it was like, they're listening to the Nazi Manifesto. What the heck?
Yeah. To know. Yeah, I know.
And the thing is really it wasn't that bad, but it was that kind of a shock. They weren't paying attention to what was going on.
Yeah.
Um, and so they overreact.
Yeah.
The things with D&D of, oh, it's the devil, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. You let some small group with some really weird ideas decide that, oh, whatever it may happen to be, no matter what else was happening, this is evil, this is against our thing, and then they try to make laws for everybody to try and restrict it so that they didn't even have to hear about this no longer exists. It's like, no, you know, let's have a conversation about this. Let's talk about this, but just because you feel that way means, it's then don't do it.
Yeah.
Forbid your kid. That's fine. You want to do that and say, your kids can't do this? Fine. Pay
Yeah.
attention to your kids. But do not restrict my right to enjoy
Not only,
D&D or
not only
rock
that, it was
music or
built on
whatever it
lies.
is.
It was built on
Oh, yeah.
lies, and specifically, it was built on lies from the religious, from the religious side, and
Oh,
and
yeah.
again, that continued for like when I got into Dungeons and Dragons, I was 13. when I got into Dungeons and Dragons, and I had to explain to my own mother and family what Dungeons and Dragons actually was. Because again, they're like, "Oh, that's the devil." Because again, I do come from they're not as like they're better now. They're way better now. I think I think as society moves forward and things become more. But I had to explain to them, it's like, no, Dungeons and Dragons is not. Yes, we fight and kill demons. It's not satanic. It's not anything. It's like Lord of the Rings. You know, we're the good guys. Yes, you can play bad guys in it. Yes, you can be a weirdo person, but I like playing Rangers and playing video games. And then my mother got into Gemstone, if you know what that is.
Mhm.
It's an old mud game, you know,
And
where you play Rangers and all elves and all this stuff. I'm like, that's all it is. That's all Dungeons and Dragons is a place for me to have fun, and be creative.
exactly, and that's what the whole thing was. It's a play with rules. It's theater with rules where you get to make up the plot as you go along. And people just didn't understand that. Oh, it's this, and it's teaching them how to do that. And it's like, you teach people, you teach your kids how to do some really nasty, crappy things as well. But
Yeah,
you're not sitting there and enforcing it for the most part on other people. Usually they have to be absolutely vile, disgusting, and dangerous. But you know, anymore, there are times when busybodies, people that just can't be satisfied with their own lives and they have to run everybody else's lives, that cause a lot of problems for others.
yeah,
And I say that because I've been a victim of that particular fallacy.
yeah.
Uh, my daughter was accused of not being in school, and one of the parole officers, or not parole,
You're talking about the Child Protective System,
yeah,
right?
the CPS was
CPS.
called a truant officer. That's it. A truant
Yeah.
officer said, "Well, I went to the school and she wasn't there." What do you mean you went to the school? We called up the school. Oh yeah, she's in class. Which school did you go to? Oh, this one. She's not in that school. She's 3 years older than you seem to think she is.
Wow.
And once they found that out, it was like, oh, oh, okay, this was a completely bullshit thing. And we're like, strike it.
Yeah.
You know, it's on the record now that we have this strike against us. It's like, get rid of it. It was a false accusation. Well, we can't do that. Bullshit.
Yeah.
And those types of things, that was a case of busybodies trying to interfere with somebody else, trying to cause problems for somebody else, being able to use those things against somebody.
Yeah.
And there are that some of the laws that are actually on the books are cases of busybodies. The the 17th Amendment, prohibition itself,
Yeah.
or 18th Amendment. Prohibition itself was a bunch of busybody, you know, rotten old biddies that were upset because their particular husbands were getting drunk and managed to get it made into federal constitutional law. And it's like they realized after, a while and rescinded it, but it was like, no, these busybodies should not get that kind of power and it should be
Yeah.
much more considered.
Again,
But,
this is why decentralized power, like for the most part, which is what the government was originally built here, was a lot of decentralized power with certain upper things making decisions. Again, because again, when you have that, you have a lot more conflict, or people like again, especially we're so big now. We have so many more people than back then too. You have to remember that. Like we in 100 years, the world has exploded with the number of people that actually live here. I forgot what
oh
the
yeah,
number back then was, but it was real low. Like we fucking outshined it. The number of people here, and that's also a difficulty we weren't prepared for. You know, um, and what lets these things happen.
yeah,
Um, and I think we had this discussion where you go back a long time ago, and um, the fact that the matter there are so many people is like I think there's an equal amount of brilliant people and dumb people still. It's just that it's such a massive number, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the percentages are the same. It's just that the that percent is just a lot more vocal on places like Twitter and Facebook and such. And
But
because those are common forums, people
yeah,
seem to think that, oh, well, what goes on these forums is what everybody's thinking. It's like, no, Twitter right now in each nation only comprises about 20% of
yeah,
the entirety of the population, and that's in any country. Maximum is 20%. Most of it, it's
yeah,
about 10%.
yeah,
And so you're letting 10% of the population, not even half, 10%, make and dictate the things that everybody else should be thinking.
right,
They affect media, they affect Hollywood, they affect all these different things. And there's
yep,
not enough people that know about it specifically to say
yeah,
no.
yeah.
You
This is
know,
why, yeah, this is why decentralizing to a smaller, like again, the original concept was you need to deal with your local then goes to the bigger and then goes to up and up and up like that. That's how we're supposed to do it. So if laws are bad in your local area, that's going to harm you, you know, why would you want it to be a statewide though? Because that might be your specific problem. So you set laws or whatever for your local, right? And then you go to the bigger ones. And then you find out what's happening on a wider spread. But this is why laws like this is actually why the whole thing with laws in, let's say if you're in California, you're in Hollywood, right? There's a giant rural population out there that deal with completely different problems from the city, but because there's so many people in the city, the laws are made for the city and it hurts everyone. We don't
yes.
want that. And again, this is why the federal government isn't supposed to make laws necessarily in the way that you would think. It's supposed to set guidelines or ideals, and then the states figure out how to implement them. And it'll be different from state to state. It will just be different, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
But
I mean, there's a classic thing when you look at the landmass. California is what, the second or third largest state? Third largest, I think, because I
third,
think it's
yeah.
Alaska, Texas, and then California.
Yeah.
The third largest state, and yes, it does have a lot of the population, but it's concentrated in a couple of cities.
Yeah. But it
When
still
you
has
look at the,
but when you realize
you
that
know,
it has 40% of its population is rural, that's not a small number for
exactly, but the people
uh,
in the cities are making the rules for the people out in the country,
yeah, and that
and
should yeah.
that shouldn't be happening. People in the cities are sitting there saying, "Oh, well, you can't have guns and stuff like that." Well, you people in the cities aren't dealing with bears coming in, or other
Or the lack of
wolves or
police
animals and stuff, or the
or
lack
the
of police or these other things. You guys don't have to deal with that.
yeah.
I bet they would be changing those rules if all of a sudden they got overrun with bears and wolves and stuff like that. All of a sudden it'd be like, hey,
Well, I also want to point out that again, even when you come into gun laws, why people don't want guns and stuff in there is like, and this is what has always confused me is like, wait, so you're going to ban normal people from having guns? You guys are still dealing with gun problems, even though the whole state has this
yeah, well,
from
that boils
criminals.
down to criminals don't give a good damn about your
Exactly.
laws. They're breaking the laws anyway. So you making a law against guns, they don't give a shit.
Yeah,
They're going to have
actually,
them anyway.
they're happier about it because that means they don't have a fight.
Oh yeah, but they don't
It,
look at that.
no. Anyways, we probably should go. It's already 6:53, so we're already on our 2-hour mark. So we're gonna go ahead and close this up. And you know, you could actually talk, right?
Yes, yes. I
How about sitting there silently and looking at me like we did something wrong? Why didn't you just interject?
no.
Yes, you're good at doing it with me. Why can't you do it with others?
Because your conversations are interesting, so I let them continue.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
Oh,
That's fair. Ignore us. This is us.
I
She's
was
gonna
going to
hit.
say, you have no problem smacking him at any other time. Don't let us disturb you with that.
but uh, but yeah, I think Morgan's tired. It's like midnight or almost 1. I think midnight, right?
Midnight, yeah.
Yep. So we're gonna wrap it up. So any last thoughts without going on tangents?
No. But I just wanted to let you know I randomly doodled a few Among Us characters while you guys were talking.
Okay, I don't think anyone heard. Okay.
Well,
Ternek?
Even though we did go off on somewhat of a tangent, they still reflect back onto the main topic of conversations, of
Yeah.
talking, listening, and examining. Those are elements of good conversation, and they're good elements for all of life and all of communicating.
Yeah.
Is being able to look at things from that critical eye, and sometimes accepting the premise that you may not be absolutely right, and there may be something of use, even if it's mostly chaff. There
Yeah.
still may be something of use in a given conversation.
Yep.
If nothing else, as an example of a bad one.
Yeah.
Don't do this.
What about you, Morgan? Anything else you have to say?
No, I'm just tired.
You're tired. Okay. Well, all right. I think we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys for all coming. Always, you guys are always wonderful. So yeah, anyone who's listening after the podcast is over, if you are interested and want to hear more, go ahead and share, subscribe, whatever the things we're supposed to be doing, because like algorithm bullshit, whatever it is. But if you really do like us, come back, check it out more, share it with other things. I'm sure our tangents are interesting. And so thank you for coming to this is the Spoken Word with Raz. Thank you for coming. I hope you guys all have a great morning, evening, whenever you're listening to it. Say bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
And we're out.